What's up, guys? I'm AJ. I'm joined by Kendall again, and thank you all for checking out this virtual NBA Draft War Room. We're back into the Southeastern Division now, so we're going to be talking about the Atlanta Hawks here. Atlanta Hawks, Kendall, a very interesting team. The team is super young. They're not necessarily the team that needs to be adding another really young player, but yet here we are, them early in the lottery having to draft another young player. But they're also a team that, based on the needs that they have, I don't know if they really are going to find the player that they would want at 6, which is one of the picks that they have. And you mentioned in the last video that, or well, not the last video, but our lottery recap, that this team may have got screwed worse than any other team when it came to the NBA draft lottery and where they got slotted. And when I ended up trying to do work on the Hawks to prepare for this video, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I said in our preview of the lottery that they were the team that I kind of hoped would get the number one pick the most, because I loved the fit of Anthony Edwards there, and they're a team that needs a high-end talent. I don't know if this team, they're in a weird spot where, like, they remind me similar of where Phoenix was last offseason as well, and where you feel like, look, we don't really need another young player. We need to get to the playoffs. And where we're slotted in the draft right now is too high to necessarily feel like, well, we got to trade out of the pick, or it's too low. First of all, to get a superstar. It's too low to get Anthony Edwards or LaMelo Ball. Ideally, was somebody that people talked about them getting, but it's also too low or too high rather, to go out and get maybe some guys later in the lottery that may fit their roster better. So that's what the conundrum that the Atlanta Hawks are in right now, where you feel like, do you trade down and collect assets, which is what Phoenix did last year, trading down, getting Cam Johnson, but then also getting a guy that helped them in Dario Saric, adding Ricky Rubio, and now they had what was almost a playoff team, especially if DeAndre Ayton would have not been suspended. That's a playoff team in Phoenix. Or do you have a situation where you say, look, we have the 6th pick in the draft, which is what Phoenix had as well last year. Do we completely trade out and try and trade for a star? Maybe package this pick with John Collins for a star. It's tough because the 6th pick in this draft has very little value. So I don't know if you can get that star player. So that's the conundrum that Atlanta's in right now. But it's an odd one.
It definitely is. It's going to be interesting. I think that you mentioned a good point about Collins. I think that he's going to be an interesting player to follow this offseason. He had a 20-10 season. He wants a max contract. The Hawks have a ton of cap space, but I don't know if they're enthused about spending max money on John Collins, especially for a guy who had to miss 20-plus games for a drug suspension. That's perhaps a risky proposition. And they got to start picking and choosing which young guys are they really going to stand behind, and what guys are they willing to move on from. So let's talk about the Atlanta Hawks, and let's get to their rundown. So the Hawks come into this draft with, obviously, like we said, pick number 6, along with pick number 50. They finished this past season with a record of 20-47. They did not make the bubble, so their season ended way back out in March. Team needs. Maturity was the first thing I thought about when I thought about team needs for the Hawks. It's not something you're going to find in a draft, but they're a team that is just so young. I think their top 4 or 5 players, all of them, in terms of scoring average, they're all under 23 years old, I think, or 23, 24 years old. Some of them, 2 of them are 21. So, they're an extremely young team, and they're going to need some veterans. They obviously lost Vince Carter. Yes, they lost Vince Carter, who's a great vet presence there. They're going to have to find a way to add some more veteran presence this offseason. Of course, again, you're not going to find that in the draft. But I also put outside shooting there, which may come as a surprise to some people when you consider they got Herter and they got Young. But for a team that was very high when it came to field goal, 3-point field goals, I think they were in the top 10. They were 30th in 3-point field goal percentage. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that a lot of those other guys, that a lot of these guys are free agents now. Your Ben Reeves, and guys like that, they shot the ball very poorly from outside. Even someone like Reddish, who you think you look at as a plus shooter, shot only 33% on volume. So they definitely could use some more shooting. I think they could also use probably a stretch big or two. Besides Collins, they really don't have anyone else from that position. Dedmon didn't shoot the ball well at all last year. And I put backcourt depth as well as defense. Besides Trae Young, they really don't have a point guard that really puts the fear in the hearts of anyone. And their defense was just abysmal all season. Clint Capella, they did trade for him. They're hoping that he could maybe help out on that end. But I think on the perimeter as well, when you're starting Herter and Young, you're going to get hurt. No pun intended, defensively. So those are the team needs. As far as free agents, you got Jeff Teague. Obviously, that's why the backcourt depth kind of came into the conversation because he's a free agent. I would think he's going to try to sign.
Even if he was there, anyone that saw Hawks Jeff Teague last year knows that it's a blessing that he's a free agent. So
it's over. It's over him. And even if he was mailing it in, and he's going to be looking to probably go to a contender as a second or third point guard, so he's not going to really be an option I think for Atlanta. As I said before, DeAndre Bembry, also a free agent, along with Scala Bissiere, Damian Jones, Trevion Graham, and Charlie Brown's on a two-way deal that is expiring. So, targets, Kendall. For me, this was a team that was impossible. Well, here's what I'll say. I totally am for the decision to try to either trade up, trade down, or trade out of this pick. I don't think that 6 is a good spot for this team at all. Because they're a team that needs really probably another primary ball handler at the 2 would be like my ideal fit. And obviously you're talking about probably an Anthony Edwards type of player, and they're not going to get that player at 6. And then you say, okay, well, what's the next thing you need? Okay, well, you need probably, I mentioned, maybe some size and some depth in the front court. Maybe someone to back up Capella and Collins, or even replace Collins. And that became tricky because you're trying to find a fit who could fit either next to Capella or next to Collins, and that's a very specific player that also doesn't seem to be all that available. So this was a tough one. I would definitely make a move if I was Atlanta, but if I do stay at 6, my first target, I would go with Onyeka Okongwu from USC. I totally understand the idea that he may be redundant to Capella a little bit, but this is a terrible defensive team. And the idea that I could bring someone in who could help protect the rim, who could throw his body around and own the glass, and brings a level of toughness to an Atlanta team that I thought was sorely missing it, I think that you could figure a way to get him out there. I think that he could fit okay next to John Collins for sure. You probably can't play him much next to Capella, but he plays so hard that he may still be able to give you good energy out there in those few times you do have to spell Collins to play with Capella. So Okongwu is a great rim runner, a great athlete, definitely an above the rim type of player, and he's got a foundation for a decent post game. I think he's going to be a good player in the NBA. He's still got a lot to work on, but if I was the Hawks, I'm going with defense and toughness, so I go with Onyeka as my first choice for the Atlanta Hawks.
Yeah, I mean, look, Big O is is definitely a favorite in Atlanta in terms of possibility there. I think obviously the Clint Capella thing makes it a little awkward. I don't know if Clint Capella is a long-term piece there. So, like, drafting Big O, like, I think James Wiseman, if he were available at 6, would be another guy you'd have to seriously take a look at, regardless of the fact that you have Capella or not. I think Okongwu is another guy that you would have to look at. But for me, I feel like drafting a backup center at 6 in 2020 seems like a reach. Which, look, I think, and I like Okongwu, and I like the fit of Okongwu in Atlanta. I don't know about after you have Clint Capella, whether or not he's a need. And honestly, this team doesn't really have any. Like, they have needs. We've talked about it out there. I won't say they don't have needs, because if they didn't, they'd be in the playoffs. They'd be in the bubble. But so obviously they have needs, but they don't have any glaring positional needs, considering they already have pretty much a starting lineup that they feel like they're going to grow with for the next 2 to 3 years. So for me, I look at you go back to those needs, and you go back to the guys that are free agents, and what's the biggest hole that I see on the Atlanta Hawks roster right now? You mentioned backcourt depth, and a lot of people hear that and they think, we talked about Anthony Edwards. They look at Trae Young, Kevin Herter, they say, look, well, you have Trae Young, so you have to improve that 2 spot. We talked about Anthony Edwards. A lot of fans have looked at Devin Vassell as a possibility to Atlanta, to add more shooting and defense. A lot of people have talked about Isaac Okoro as a guy who could also play on the wing. I feel like they have a lot of wings. I feel like you have Herter, you have Reddish. Hunter is more of a forward, but can play the three. I mean, not most of the time, but can play the three in spots, especially if he continues to work on his jump shot. Mm-hmm. So the guy I'm looking at that backup point guard spot. And I think Tyrese Haliburton is actually a very, very interesting fit with this Atlanta Hawks roster. I think when you look at Travis Schlenk, has always seemed to have, he comes from Golden State and has always tried to it seems like he's trying to approximate what was built in Golden State with the Splash Brothers, and has tried to replicate that in Atlanta. And what is one of the pieces that he is missing right now that we see with that Golden State roster that we see with Atlanta? It's Deshaun Livingston in the mix, who's the guy that can come off the bench, who can play with a Thompson and a Curry and run the offense, and have Curry play more so off the ball. And that's where Tyrese Haliburton, the guy that I believe you compared to Sean Livingston. You compared LaMelo Ball to Sean Livingston in our
Ball, but Haliburton he does have some similarities to him as well.
Right. Yeah, Haliburton has some similarities to Sean Livingston, so that I think could be an excellent fit. The one issue I would have with that fit, and this is where I look at Schlenk, I look at Lloyd Pierce, and I say you got to look Trae Young in the eye and say, can you work on playing off the ball? Because that's the piece of Trae Young's game that takes him from being whatever he is now, whatever you think of him, to being closer to what Steph Curry is. Because what makes Steph Curry so special is not only the fact that he can be that Steve Nash on the ball, pick and roll, deep 3-point threat, a guy who can get to the basket and make plays for others. Trae Young can do all those things. But what Trae Young can't do, or hasn't shown the ability to do, or the willingness to do right now, is be a guy who can make plays off the ball, who can run around screens and draw defenders without having the ball in his hands. And you could argue maybe it's not him. Maybe it's the roster he went to doesn't really have another point guard.
Yeah, they don't have a lot of ball handlers. That's a huge issue on the team right now.
Right. So that's where I look at Haliburton and I say, all right, now we got to test Trae Young. You bring in Haliburton. Now that gives Trae Young, that affords him the ability to now play off the ball. It takes a lot of pressure off of him, and it makes his job easier. Because now when you have the ball in your hands, the defense is keying in on you. But when you don't have the ball in your hands, which is what we've seen in Golden State, with not only Sean Livingston but with Draymond Green, Steph Curry is allowed to kind of roam around and make plays for himself and draw the defense without even having the ball in his hands, which makes everything easier for everyone else on the court. So, look, I think Tyrese Haliburton would be an excellent fit. I think Denny Avdija is another guy that'd be an excellent fit if you are also looking for another playmaking point guard kind of guy who isn't 6'2". Or 6'3", somebody that's bigger. Why I don't like LaMelo Ball, but I do like Haliburton and Avdija, is that LaMelo Ball offers you no stretch potential. His psyche doesn't. I don't think his mental makeup fits playing with Trae Young. I just think it'd be an awful fit. Although basketball wise, he's similar to Haliburton in his strengths and weaknesses. Haliburton, I saw him playing on that Team USA U19 team with Cade Cunningham, Jalen Green, Zaire Williams, Scotty Barnes, all the top players in the 21 class, as well as some guys in this class like Kyra Lewis. And Haliburton was arguably the best player on the team. And he wasn't the leading scorer, but he averaged almost 8 assists a game, as well as 8 points a game, and thrived playing with all those other great players. I think Haliburton is a team player in the biggest sense, and I think Atlanta is arguably the best fit for Haliburton in this draft. So I think I would go with Tyrese Haliburton if I was Atlanta.
Yeah, I thought about Haliburton a lot, and I think that was quite a bold take to go with another point guard, so to speak. But I actually agree with almost everything you said there. I do feel like Haliburton makes a lot of sense also because Haliburton's a great defender, and a defender that can play point guards and shooting guards. So yes. Putting him at the 2 he could guard the two guards for a lot of teams. He has the size and the length to do it.
And the
And
two
if there's
guards
a
not
really right, and if there's a really tough point guard that Trae Young's gonna have problems with, you could put him on the one and move Trae to maybe a shooting guard who isn't as much of a threat. So I agree. I think Haliburton is a great fit. I think similar to your conversation about Okongwu. I think for me, I was like, okay, am I really gonna draft a point guard who's I know is not gonna start, and I know is gonna be behind a guy who's gonna play 38, 37 minutes a night.
right.
But in this NBA, I think it's a little different now. I think that you could throw him out there with two other guards, in some lineups, and with how small teams are playing, I don't think it really matters. You just need guys that can go out there and hoop, and guys that can create. So I do agree though that a lot of the success of that kind of combination of Haliburton and Young would rely on Young's ability to be a threat off the ball, which is not something he's done yet. He has all the shooting ability and the shooting ability to make people fear him running around screens and spacing the floor off the ball, but it's got to be a willingness and a readiness to actually do it. And when you're a young player and you're so used to having the ball in your hands all the time, it could be a little bit of a
his usage rate would take a massive dip. That's something that, I mean, again, you have to talk to him about. Like, are you comfortable with that? You're not going to have the ball in your hands the entire game.
Larry Brown had to explain that to Allen Iverson way back in 2000, and I was not happy. Allen Iverson was not happy moving to the two because he played his whole career having the ball in his hands 100% of the time. But Larry Brown had to tell him, look, one, we could run more natural sets with you off the ball to get you to score, and two, you being off the ball will bring the gravity to the defense away from wherever the ball is, and that's going to help these other subpar offensive players maybe get better shots. And Larry Brown's one of the greatest coaches of all time, and when Allen bought in, they went to the NBA Finals. So I'm not saying Trae Young needs to move to the two. We understand he's a point guard. I'm just saying there definitely is a potential benefit to having a bigger point guard who can defend, play alongside Trae Young. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, look, Haliburton, not the flashiest pick, but again, where you are in the draft, you're not getting Anthony Edwards. Again, unless you're trying to trade up, which may take assets. You're not getting Anthony Edwards at 6. So you have to say to yourself, does drafting Isaac Okoro or Devin Vassell really fix our problems? Or do we still have the same issues of, we're a little better defensively if we get those guys, which is great, but the ball's still going to be in Trae Young's hands 90% of the time. And he's really still the only guy you have to worry about making any plays. And that's a concern. And look, I think Trae Young is great. I don't think there's still avenues for him to get better, like I mentioned, him playing off the ball. But in his current kind of role, I don't know if there are really that many more ways he can get better. He just needs more help. But I don't know if those guys are necessarily helping him next year. I think Tyrese Haliburton is a guy that takes a lot of weight off of his shoulders, can help space the floor for him, but when he doesn't have the ball in his hands, can still initiate offense, and is a guy that you don't need to rely on scoring the basketball. So his weaknesses are not covered up because, my biggest issue with Haliburton is if he goes to a team like the Knicks, you're expecting him to be a scorer, and that's just not what he is. And teams are going to have to be ready for that. But I think the Atlanta Hawks are the last team in this draft that are in the top 5, 6, 7, or the top 10 that need a scorer. They need guys that can kind of do other things. I think Haliburton does what Okoro and Vassell could do on the defensive side, but also gives them another dimension offensively. I think it's the pick. Although I understand why there are a lot of Hawks fans that like Okoro. Look, Okoro's a local guy. He's a local guy. He's a great fit. It's just with Reddish.
You got Reddish and you got Hunter. I just don't see how you're drafting Okoro. I can see Avdia more because you could convince me that Avdia can, as you said, be your primary ball handler in some lineups, and that could really shake things up.
Be the Iguodala.
And Okoro is a really good ball handler too. And I actually compared him to Iguodala. I think he has the beginnings of maybe that kind of ability. He's still, young. He's still improving on his game. But I just feel like right now with what you just got with DeAndre Hunter, I don't know how putting Okoro out there makes sense considering the guys you just drafted. Now,
Is there?
one more name I do want to float out there that I think Atlanta should keep their eye on is Obi Toppin, primarily because John Collins, if you do decide to trade him, Toppin I think fits in very nicely as a supplement to to not just Trae Young in a pick and pop game, but also to Clint Capella as a stretch four man. So while I don't really love the idea of Collins and Toppin playing a lot of minutes together. I think if you decide, look, I'm not paying Collins max money, we gotta get him out of here. You know how I think about Toppin. I think he's a 100% stud. So I totally think he could come in. I'm not saying that he's not averaging 20 and 10 next year. I don't think, but I think he could definitely fill the shoes that John Collins would leave, and then maybe you use that John Collins piece to get Trae Young some more help in the backcourt, or to get that veteran presence we've been talking about. That could be something I see them do as well.
The ghost of Josh Smith and the Highlight Factory would be very excited about.
Yeah. And I said, to me, Obi Toppin reminds me a lot of Josh Smith, and Josh Smith could actually shoot. So, I mean, that's a win-win for the Hawks. Somehow they were able to do that if they did get good value for John Collins on the trade market. What do you guys think the Atlanta Hawks should do this upcoming NBA draft? Make sure you guys leave a comment in this video giving us your thoughts. Do you like the idea of Haliburton, or are you on Yeko Okongwu, or make the case for Isaac Okoro? We know a lot of Hawks fans, him being a local kid, you may want him. We're not as sold on it, but he's definitely going to be in the conversation. Leave a comment. Let us know your thoughts. Also, make sure you like this video and subscribe to our channel, New Generation Media. We'll have plenty more of our virtual NBA draft war room sessions. The Atlantic Division is already done. We're coming out with the Southeast Division now, and we're starting with the Hawks. So just keep it locked in, man. We're doing this all the way up to the NBA draft. So I thank you guys for checking us out. For Kendall, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace.